Thank you to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So I wanted to make this video for quite a while since I think this kind of setting for anyone who's using a tablet of any sort with a stylus, this is kind of important to know to kind of customize your drawing experience a little bit better. So starting off in Procreate, I wanted to show you guys the 6B pencil brush to give an example of what I'm going to be talking about, which is the pressure curve today. So in our settings, we can go to preferences and go into pressure and smoothing. Now I'm specifically talking about Procreate first, and then we'll talk about Clip Studio Paint and the tablet a little bit later. My pressure curve looks like this, as I usually have a lighter hand, but I still want to produce darker marks. So let's go ahead and reset this so you guys can see what it originally looks like, which is just a straight diagonal line like this. And I will make sure to link a video in the description talking more in depth about the actual curve graph, like x-axis, y-axis, so you guys have a better idea, because I think they'll do a better job at explaining. But you can see with this footage, at a very light pressure or somewhat normal pressure, I actually can't really make a very dark mark without having to press super hard with the pencil to make the 6B pencil work. So sketching normally, it's very, very faint and very hard to see, which will cause a lot of strain on my hand, as well as probably do a lot of wear and tear onto my tablet and or screen protector. With small adjustments such as like changing the threshold, you can see that I can make a little bit of darker marks. So let's revert this again so I can show you another example using the painting brush that I usually like to use. So right here, I'm going to choose a darker color, and this is at the default setting for the pressure sensitivity curve. So you can see that I can still get my lights and my darks quite easily. It's not too bad, but we'll go ahead and switch our pressure curve once again to what I prefer. So I'm going to lower it down the threshold right here, and I'm going to move my curve to about here, which is typically where I like to have it, so that I don't have to press as hard to get a lot of my darker areas. This helps with this brush, as if I want to kind of get more crisp lines or sharper edges, I don't have to press as hard to get those, as you can see right here, so I can do kind of my flats a little bit easier. I'm going to show what it looks like at the default setting once again. It's not too bad, but I still have to press a little bit harder to kind of get my flat areas right here. But if we go ahead and go back into our pressure curve once again and kind of do the opposite of what I usually set my curve at, which is dipping the other way, you can see that we have it a lot lighter, and it requires a lot more pressure for me to even get like remotely dark with this brush. So you can see that I will grip the side of my iPad to kind of stabilize it, because I'm going to be pressing down pretty hard and it doesn't feel too great on my iPad. So switching over to Clip Studio Paint, I wanted to show you guys where the pressure sensitivity curve is here. So we go into File, then Pen Pressure and Settings. And right here you can see my curve is fairly similar, but I find it a little bit annoying having to go into this particular setting to change often. So instead, I'm going to go down into my tablet settings and look at the curve here. So I find this a little bit more easier to change. You can see that at default, you can kind of see the numbers right here. I'm hitting about, I don't know, anywhere between like below 1,000 to about 1,500 is what I'm kind of hitting. And then if I change my curve this way, you can see that it's more sensitive. So a lot lighter touch is kind of hitting higher numbers. And then we'll do the opposite. So pressing still quite on the lighter side, I am kind of hitting more or less below 1,000. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense, but I'll show you guys more of a, so you can kind of see like the different amount of pressure that I can kind of use to get different looks. But I'm going to show you guys visually so it's a little bit easier for you guys to understand. So I have the kind of 3 typical pressure curves that I've seen. You can definitely change this up, especially if you're doing anything like calligraphy or anything like that, line work. You can kind of personalize it a little bit more for yourself. But let's start with the first one, which I like to think of it as being you're super light-handed, but you want to produce darker lines, so you don't want to use a lot of pressure. Then we have our default setting. I'm using the same brush and I'm trying to be consistent with a light touch and a normal kind of touch on the tablet. Then we have our last one, which is our requires kind of more pressure to create a darker mark. So you can kind of see the difference. And I find that some brushes actually kind of function a little bit better with certain kind of settings. So the brush that I'm currently using is what I wanted to use for more like sketching or rough sketches, but I still wanted to build up value. And I was not really getting that and not being able to have a wider range of value with the first pressure curve that I usually like to use often, but I needed to change my pressure curve almost the opposite to achieve this particular look. So being able to use lighter lines, being able to build up value, I needed to change my pressure curve a little bit the other way so that it becomes a little bit less sensitive. So I could actually take my time to put more pressure to put down a darker line. So one last example is through line art. So I'm gonna go kind of back and forth doing a squiggle of thick and thin, and you can and I think this comparison will work actually very well. So this one was obviously with the pressure curve kind of being dipped downwards into the bottom right hand corner. And then now we have our pressure curve the opposite. So kind of pushing the curve to the upper left. And you can kind of see the difference between my start and my stopping point for my line work, as well as when I'm doing any hatching or shading. There's quite a bit of difference between how thick my lines turned out, and oftentimes I couldn't really get thin lines. So when I figured it out, you can see that I was having a little bit more fun working on line art. So this is what I did of the birthday art for 17th June. So you can see I had a much easier time being more satisfied with the line work here because I was able to do the thick and thin a little bit easier. I was able to have the lines taper a little bit more naturally, and then I can build up value kind of like on my own. But we can also have the opposite where maybe I want more consistent line work, like such as these chibi emotes. So I liked having a little bit of the opposite where I had to put little pressure to get like thicker, kind of more darker lines, so I didn't have to strain my hand doing such consistent line work. So I highly recommend, if you haven't, play around with your pressure curve on your tablet or in certain art programs such as like Procreate. I believe Ibis Paint has it, Clip Studio Paint, because especially if you are light-handed, highly recommend changing the curve to go up and towards the upper left so that you can still be light-handed and still produce dark enough marks so that you're not putting so much pressure onto your tablet as well as your hand. So before we get into the little sketching and line art session, let's take a break with our sponsor TokyoTreat and Sakuraco. If you're looking to try out new snacks from Japan, then you're in luck with these snack boxes where you can experience Japan from the comfort of your own home. Looks like this month is Tokyo centered. TokyoTreat is a monthly pop Japanese snack subscription box with 20 of the latest exclusive limited edition and seasonal flavor Japanese snacks that are only available in Japan for a limited time. This includes a full-size drink, an exclusive ramen, and a variety of different kinds of snacks. I can already see a few things that I want to try out. Looks like we have some umeboshi flavored chips as well as some squid flavored ones as well. While Sakuraco is an authentic Japanese snack subscription box, Sakuraco supports local Japanese snack makers, and each box comes with 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, but also includes some Japanese tea as well as a Japanese tableware. I can see a lot of different kinds of sweets in this month's box. There are so many snacks that I actually haven't really seen before, so I'm really excited to try them out. The tableware this time around is the Tokyo plate. It's super cute with the different imagery representing Tokyo in the style of kind of like blue and white ceramics, perfect for kind of holding all your little snacks. Both boxes come with a 24-page cultural guide, and I love that it includes the information regarding ingredients and allergens of each of the snacks. I'm also allergic to kiwis, so it's kind of nice to know which ones I should avoid and let my family eat instead. The booklet also informs you of little tidbits of information revolving around culture and traditions in Japan. Each month has a different theme, meaning that you get to try out a whole new selection of new treats and snacks every month. So for example, TokyoTreat's box theme for the month of June is Tokyo Snackathon, and similarly enough, Sakuraco's theme is Traditions of Tokyo. So before I talk about the snacks, let's check out this month's tea from Sakuraco. And it looks like we have a kuromame tea. The aroma smells kind of like familiar or adjacent to coffee, but it's a little bit earthier and it doesn't really taste like coffee, which I'm kind of glad. But this one also has a nice roasted flavor with almost like a little touch of sweetness. I'm glad that this one is also caffeine free as well. So if you're a fan of milk tea, then this Kit Kat from TokyoTreat will definitely be a favorite. It definitely tastes like the royal milk tea kind of flavor, which I'm a super big fan of. I also did try the Koikea Ume chips, which caught my eyes at the very beginning. It's kind of nice and tangy without losing that potato flavor. Sakuraco had so many cute sweets. Apparently June in Tokyo have a lot of hydrangea flowers, which inspired these adorable sweets right here. They are almost too cute to eat. I like that these hydrangea amber sugars were super soft in the inside and had a little bit more of a harder outside layer. Super tasty. They had a good selection of more savory type or like saltier snacks as well. So yeah, definitely enjoyed those ones alongside with the tea. So if you like to get a box for yourself or you want to give these as a lovely gift to family or friends, then check out the links in the description and get your boxes today. Thank you again to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the sketching in line art kind of demo session. So unfortunately, I accidentally did not record the actual rough sketch portion of this particular little drawing. So we're just gonna actually start with kind of cleaning things up and darkening our lines. But I wanted to show a little bit of a demonstration of kind of where I would apply changing my pressure curve. So in a previous video where I did an ASMR video of, I think it was Masaki and Kaisen sketches on the XP pen in Clip Studio Paint as an ASMR session, I kind of found out that I was having a lot of trouble finding some kind of sketching pencil, HB pencil, 6B pencil, anything that had like a rougher texture and be able to kind of utilize that kind of nice softness as well as kind of like the texture. Everything came out too dark and too like, I don't know, there's just not any room for being able to build up value other than like maybe the right Boru pen where you can just kind of go over and kind of build up value due to like the multiply setting that's set onto that particular brush. But during that session, I decided to change the pressure curve on my tablet instead of the one in Clip Studio Paint. I don't really like changing the one in Clip Studio Paint because you do have to go through at least 2 other menus to do so. But oftentimes, if I'm drawing on my tablet, I sometimes do have the XP Pen application open in general, and I can change the pressure curve quite easily. So I decided to change it so that I had a larger range with the particular brushes that I wanted to use, because I was looking at the different sample pieces that they usually do whenever they put up like materials and stuff on the Clip Studio Paint material asset store, and I saw that it had a good range for like using the 6B pencils or any of these more natural looking traditional-esque imitating kind of brushes. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me earlier that there's no way I was struggling with literally every brush I was downloading that wasn't something like a hard brush or a painting brush. So I decided to change the pressure curve, and I was correct that it was kind of low-key stunting me from not being able to utilize the brush to its full extent. And I feel like sometimes when people copy settings, let's say for brushes, like custom brushes and stuff, and it doesn't behave the same way, part of it could be like user error, which is what I deemed all those previous sessions as. But another part is like maybe you didn't adjust a certain setting, which in this case was the pressure curve setting that I needed to really adjust to fully utilize the entirety of, you know, having the full range of being able to use the pen in a way that like behaves similarly to one that's like traditional. Hopefully that makes sense. Like being able to lightly build up value. And if I want to press harder, it'll act like a pencil where you press down really hard with a lead, or if you use a lot less pressure, then, you know, it becomes super light. So it makes my sketching session, let's say, of the character that I'm drawing today, which I kind of forgot to introduce. Now, I'm probably going to butcher his name, so I don't know how to say it. It's Jiao, I think, Qiu. So maybe it's Jiao Chu. I don't know how to say his name, but he is a character from Honkai Star Rail that I'm super excited for. I just like him visually so far, since we know nothing really about him. So I did want to do like kind of a quick sketch of him for the most part, but you'll see a little bit later that I'm kind of gonna run out of steam near the end of the sketching session, so I don't really do the entire shading for absolutely everything, and we'll kind of switch gears to something else. But I think this was kind of a nice little session of me being able to use the brush that I always wanted to use and utilizing it a little bit better. So you can see that there's some lighter areas. I was able to push some of the values if I pressed a little bit harder, but there's like a nice consistency. I'm also able to just play around with leaving a lot of the lighter areas as my more sketchier parts and being able to cover it up with doing tighter line work, as well as just building up a lot of value to kind of make everything appear a little bit more clean. But this is kind of the part where I kind of got fed up. So I decided to lower the opacity, make a new layer, switch over to a different brush, which I will make sure to link both brushes into the description if you're interested in either of the brushes. And let's do a little bit of a line art session. Now, I talked about line art quite a bit in previous videos where I've always stated that I've disliked doing line art. I didn't really like doing it in Procreate. The only times that I enjoyed it to some extent was in Paint Tool Sai. Now, interestingly enough, Paint Tool Sai, at least version 1, I haven't fiddled around with version 2 quite much, but version 1 does not have a pressure curve to my knowledge. So I always just dealt with whatever setting they had, but I always felt like for whatever reason, I didn't feel the need to change any particular settings, even though there are no settings. But I had a pretty okay time doing line art, so I always did my chibi work, anything that required line art in Paint Tool Sai. But for the last, at least, I think a year or so, I've been trying my best to push myself to do a lot more inking and line work in Clip Studio Paint. One, Clip Studio Paint just has a lot more versatility and customizability to the user, so I really enjoy that. But I could not get used to using either the stabilization or getting used to doing line art in general. Now, part of that reason is going to be due to the fact that I did not change my pressure sensitivity of my tablet to kind of match what I wanted. So automatically when I start like a new program for any like drawing or art or anything, I will always try to find a pressure curve sensitivity first so that I'm not burning a hole through my tablet by pressing super hard and being super heavy-handed. But after I set it, I kind of forget about it. So yeah, I forgot that I set my curve to pretty much always produce pretty dark marks or like, you know, thick lines with very little pressure. So when I did line art at the time, I was kind of having issues with the initial placing of when your tablet hits the, or your pen hits the tablet. So the first initial line that you do, the very tip of it becomes like thick right away, but then I had more control when it came to the tapering at the end, which made line art a little bit weird because I would have to either erase the thicker end or I would just have to kind of deal with the fact that my lines were just gonna look thick overall. So I didn't do a lot of like line width variation. But now that I've recently kind of changed it and I've been trying my best to learn how to ink a little bit more, I think I might be slowly coming around to doing more line work. Just a little bit. I've been doing a lot more kind of like screen toning alongside with line work and stuff for 17 illustrations, like for birthday stuff for them. So I've been doing a little bit of practice here and there, and I definitely want to do more of it so that eventually I'll be comfortable enough to potentially do some kind of comic-esque, webtoon-esque story or like short story. I don't know how I want to do it per se, but I want to make some kind of like story or illustrate just small little tidbits of Masaki's like life, because how I have always envisioned it, as well as just like a lot of my OCs nowadays, or like my current set of OCs, I guess, technically revolves around Masaki's story, which is very vague because I want to keep it more like slice of life. So it's just more like everyday occurrence of like whatever events or whatever he's up to. So eventually I would like to get comfortable enough doing line work and stuff, because obviously my sketchier painterly kind of meshing of sketching or painting for illustration doesn't really work for storytelling per se. It works for like a final illustration, but for like comics and like making things crisp and clean or like a little bit more easier for people to read is more important than making things visually pleasing, if that makes sense. Like there's no reason for me to render everything if it's just like people are gonna, scroll to read or like, flip through quite quickly. So, I want to find a good balance, but I definitely think I need to have a strong foundation with my line work just because if I dislike it from the get-go, it's probably not going to be finished ever. Which is why I'm kind of being a little bit more determined trying to find a good brush that I like for line work as well as a workflow that I like, because sometimes I want to add a lot of texture for the line work or like the initial portion, but then I might do screen toning, I might do coloring, and it might not even be needed. So even like right now for the current step that I'm on, I decided to fill in the character. I'm not gonna attempt to say his name again, with kind of like a gray base, and then I wanted to add pink as kind of our shadow color. Now the reason for the gray base is just to add some kind of masking layer almost for my pink to sit on top of, but I'm gonna change the gray, as you can see, back to the same color as my initial canvas color, so it doesn't really get in the way, but it's just easier for me to clip this shadow color on top so that I don't have to erase outside of my lines later. And yeah, I decided to go with pink just because his hair is also pink, and we will add kind of our shadows and just anything like that until we are kind of satisfied with the shapes and just the placement of everything. And then I will add a little bit of screen tone on top just to kind of change the vibe of it, just because I kind of like screen tones along with line work. It just looks really neat in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of the direction that I decided to take this particular drawing into, I guess. But for the most part, I will be showing you guys the, I think, time-lapse version of this entire session, even though I did miss the rough sketching portion. But hopefully with the time-lapse, you'll be able to see that little missed portion of that drawing session. But I will be showing both pictures at the very end, side by side, so you can kind of get a good idea of what I was kind of up to in terms of when I switched my pressure curve to be a little bit less sensitive. So it required a little bit more work on my end to get kind of the variations and the thickness and the darkness that I wanted for whatever reason for the illustration versus making it a little bit easier on my hand. But for the most part, I don't think it did too much quote unquote damage to my hand to do so much pressure. It's not super bad. I didn't change the sensitivity that low. So I think it's still bearable, and I think I will continue to switch back and forth depending on what I need for my own drawing habits and needs. So I definitely recommend you do the same for whatever you're working on, just to check. Because if you can alleviate some pressure and some strain off of your hand, I would highly recommend it, especially if you plan to draw quite frequently, or if you find yourself maybe a little bit heavy-handed because you're trying to produce such dark marks, but it's just not really translating onto the tablet itself. So kind of like the little last step right here, I'm adding a screen tone. So to apply it in the pink, I decided to unclip the pink first and then clip the screen tone to the pink first. Then after that, I'll merge them, and then I will clip the pink back onto our base of the character so that things look kind of more contained and a little bit cleaner as it was before. So here's kind of the little two drawings side by side with the different looks. I had a lot more fun, I think, sketching than I did with the line art, just because that's a given for me, but I did not dislike the line arting session this time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's session, and I'll show you guys a little bit of a close-up of each of the drawings as well as the little time lapse at the very end. But I think that is it for today's drawing session. So I will leave you guys here and talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!